So we are into our thrive mode, moving beyond just survival into really allowing ourselves to thrive through our lives. I don't know about you, but sometimes we get stuck in the way life is. And we start playing out patterns. And then sometimes life has a wonderful way of interrupting our stuckness, either through choice or through a crisis. But we want to look at how do we really move into that way of being that allows us to experience the fullness of life. Now, when Rich first came to me, or I got wind, he didn't come to me, he was very sneaky. But I got wind, because I do have eyes everywhere, and that he was going to New Hampshire to explore some possibilities. And I told him, we are here to support you in living your fullest life. He completed his master's. He's now working on his doctorate. He's got a wonderful opportunity at this wonderful prep school in Vermont to really pursue his passion. And I said, my only concern is I don't know how you're going to deal with this commute. But we support you in living your vision. I just want you to know. So, all kidding aside, I'm so grateful for his participation. Rich, for those of you who didn't know, stepped into a position that had been filled for about 25 years by the same musician. So he was part of the fabric and culture and everything of this community. And when Jeffrey left, we were all like, oh, now what? And so we held that space for the right and perfect and amazing musician. Not only has he filled that position, but he's brought great joy and love and light to all of us. So thank you. Yes. Okay, I'll give the speech. So we've been using THRIVE as an acronym. We looked at starting with being thankful. It all starts with gratitude. As we are in this wonderful life that we've been given, there's a wonderful passage from the Bible that says, in all things give thanks. The key operative word in that is all. Because our tendency is want to give thanks for the things that we like and that fit our plan, and to not give thanks for those other things. But truly, as we grow into this state of gratitude for the many blessings and the gracefulness of Spirit showing up in our lives, we move into a different way of being. I've been thinking about and speaking about lately this problem with materiality. That there's nothing wrong with having material good. In fact, we encourage it, support it, and want you to be prosperous beings. But one of the things that we notice is if our lives become all about accumulation, then there's no end to it. There's no end to how much you can have, particularly in the culture in which we live in, where we have so many people who have just billions of dollars, so many billionaires and all this sort of thing, that you can never really satisfy that because there's always something more. So what we want to learn to do is to be grateful for the good that is in our life at wherever we are. And it seems like it's sort of a paradox, doesn't it? That we are holding this, I'm grateful and happy right where I am, and yet I'm willing to experience more. It's just that the problem with materiality, who our new Pope, who I'm loving, is speaking to, is that when we put our emphasis on things, on what's out there, on accumulation, we can move into that greed mindset that always is wanting more. And so there's a very powerful thing to simply be grateful for the many blessings in our lives. And then we looked at the idea of being happy. And as it turns out, happiness is an inner spiritual quality, and we learned that we must learn to generate that from within ourselves. Now, I realize that we live in a time and in a culture that bombards us with messages about how our happiness is outside of ourselves. And that if we can get the thing, if we can get the job, if we can get the spouse, if we can get whatever it is, then we get to live happily ever after. But most of us have had some experience of less than happily ever after, haven't we? Even after accumulating the thing that we thought we wanted. And so we begin to understand that happiness is an inner spiritual quality. It is the quality of joy. And that we choose to pursue that happiness through the God-given gifts that we've been given. Today I wanted to talk to you about the third quality of thriving, which is resilience. Now, I may get in trouble with the Science of Mind police. So, bear with me. If I'm not here next week, well, we know what happened. Oh, actually, I won't be here next week. Yes, exactly. Karen Russo will be, so hope you like her. No, because I think bad things happen. I think just bad things happen in our lives. And so it's not all joy and wonder and happy and light all of the time. For me, I come back to the passage from Ecclesiastes that unto everything there is a season. And so it is not that we don't have experiences in our lives that are just hurtful and painful and challenging, no matter how enlightened you may be. So for me, it is a recognition that resilience is that capacity to get back up when we've been knocked down. And hopefully to do it rather quickly, but to absorb the lessons that are coming to us all of the time. You see, in this lifetime that we are given, we have situations that are probably outside of our control. One of the dangers of this teaching is when people think that they, by their creative being, create everything that happens in their life. And I think it's a very limited way of understanding our teaching. We do not create everything that happens in our life. We influence our lives incredibly, though, by our attitude, by who we are, how we think. And so when we get knocked down by life, there is an opportunity for us to grow and expand and become. But it's not, we want to be careful of what's often called spiritual bypass. You see, when bad things happen, those of us who are metaphysically minded, so there's a temptation sometimes to move into the spiritual bypass, which says, I'm not going to feel what I'm just feeling here. Rather, I'm going to make up some nice, lofty, metaphysical explanation how everything's in perfect order and always in divine right timing, and we all are where we choose to be all of the time, and blah, 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 blah. Now, some of those are true. There's a truth behind that, but sometimes we use that to avoid the actual pain of that situation. And for me, when we move into spiritual bypass, we don't really give ourselves the opportunity to do true spiritual healing, which is what is the opportunity that is being generated by this situation. A number of years ago, I was at a Selamar, which was our annual conference in near Monterey, California. Just a magical, magical place and a magical conference. And for 75 years, we've had that convention there. And, back in the day, Ernest Holmes would come and speak, and it's just wonderful. And they always have great speakers. And then, I forget what year it was, but we had a woman by the name of Jackie Flug. Now, some of you may be familiar with Jackie Flug. She wrote a book called Miles to Go Before I Sleep. Her story was that 3 months after she'd married, she was a special ed teacher. She was on a flight in the Middle East and was, and the plane was taking off from Athens to Cairo. And shortly after it took off, it was hijacked. And there was terrorists that then caused them to land in Malta. And she was the 5th person to be shot in this tragedy. She was shot and thrown out of the plane. This was part of the terrorist demands to make things happen. So she was shot in the head and laid on the tarmac for 5 hours, pretending to be dead. Some part of her said, don't move. Let them think you're dead. She had some clarity of insight. So her story is remarkable. And her story was about how she made her way back, how she learned to live, because there was permanent brain damage to that. She could only see half of things. So she's very funny. She was saying, so because I could only see this, I learned to adapt because that's what we do. And so she said, I can't tell you how many times I've walked into the women's room and seen all these urinals. Because she'd learned to adapt to words that she could only see half of, and so it turns out, oops, Now, as a special ed teacher who then got to experience a disability, she said it gave her tremendous insight and compassion and understanding into what happens for people when they have had these traumatic brain injuries. When the person is struggling to do this, but the brain is not cooperating. She took her story, and it was not, it was a long, drawn-out, painful, arduous story as she went through it. She said, she had a great line. I don't think I copied it, but she's saying that how she understands from the inside what it's like to have a learning disability and how frustrating it is when your brain won't work the way it's supposed to. But you see, what she did was some part of her emerged through this experience. She incorporated that experience into her life, and now she's an inspirational speaker all over the world. She's written books, she's talked to people, she's given people hope from her tragedy. So life is filled with these stories. All of us can point to an experience in our life that hurt us, that wounded us, that damaged us. And the question we all have to ask ourselves is, what do I do with it? For some, they withdraw, they get bitter, they do whatever, and it's understandable. For others, they take those experiences and learn to allow something more from their life to emerge through them. Over and over and over, as we're walking this walk and painful things are happening, we don't have to say it's not happening. It's not real. It is real. But there's a greater reality. And the greater reality is that we are one with the divine. That we have spiritual qualities and spiritual essence that is within us. And so I have come to believe that all of it is part of our greater soul's unfolding in this world. To say that it's only about manifesting is a very limited understanding of the teaching. Although there's nothing wrong with manifesting. It's cool. Why not? So there's some qualities that you see are common and inherent in people who have survived great experiences, great tragic experiences. And so I was reading an article I thought it was very interesting about, they're using this, Aaron Ralston, who some of you know, was the kid that went rock climbing by himself, didn't tell anybody, and got stuck in a bad way. They made a movie about it. 27 hours, I think, yeah. And so, now, what I was going to say about Jackie Flug is, I remember going into that situation, that week conference, with a problem. I had a situation I was dealing with in my life. But I got to tell you, listening to Jackie tell her story pretty diminished my story. I mean, like, okay, maybe not such a big deal. Getting shot in the head by a terrorist and spending the next 10 years trying to get back to normalcy. Okay, you win. You get to have the bigger, better story. Okay, I'm going to give up my drama around this. But you see, so too, here's a young man who goes off rock climbing by himself, doesn't tell anyone, finds himself in a situation where he is literally trapped between a rock and a hard place. With no way to get out of it. It became very interesting. So, but there's some commonalities. There are people that go through these experiences, and the first commonality is reason. that capacity that we have with our logical minds to figure out a solution. Now, his first approach was to try and take this little knife that he had with him to the rock, to the boulder. Realized, I don't think this is going to work. And so we know the outcome of that. But you see, there's something amazing that is within us, that we have a capacity to set aside our panic in the midst of a situation. This intelligence that Jackie Fluke had that said, just lay here and play like you're dead, rather than be killed. For 5 hours she was on the tarmac. Finally, when they came to move the bodies, the situation got resolved. They came to move the bodies. You got to love this. How would you like to be one of the body handlers? And she opens her eyes and says, are you the good guys or the bad guys? That'll mess up your day, won't it? Right? But there was a reason transcendent of, if you had a reason to freak out, that qualifies in my book, right? But she had reason. That says there's focus. That survivors become 100% present in the moment. You see, we can be so distracted. But I tell you what crisis does for all of us is it focuses our attention. Sometimes we don't pay attention to things while they're kind of niggling at us. But sometimes when they slap us upside the head, we say, aha, I've got to be focused. I've got to get this handled. I've got to do what I need to do to get this handled. The other quality is humor. And you see this over and over and over. Aaron Ralston, in his story about talking about making the decision to what would he do, he said, first I tried to chip away at the rock by using a multi-tool knife. You know, the kind you get with a $15 flashlight and it's free, which is probably how I got it, right? Not the best tool to take out a boulder, but sufficient to remove one's arm if that becomes the option, which is what he did. He saved his own life. I know. So again, I don't know how bad your day is, but there's probably some room for having a new perspective on it. Then I think the most important piece is about learning to have the integration. See, for me, what's so fascinating about Jackie Fluke's story is that she, in a way, had soul development. She was called to work with special ed. She worked with children that had learning disabilities. She had all of this experience in her life. Then she had this tragedy occur, and it was then to move her next phase of her life. She said, I had tremendous insight and compassion and understanding for what was only an intellectual understanding before, of what it's really like when your brain is not behaving the way it's supposed to. And so she then integrated her prior life, this tragedy, into her future life, and now she's a motivational, inspirational speaker. She speaks all over the world. She's been very instrumental in brain science and helping people understand. So it's like, what do we do with the tragedy in our life? What do we do with the sadness? What do we do with the hurt? What do we do with the pain? And the opportunity over and over and over is that we then, if we want to really thrive, if we really want to heal, if we want to be blessed, then we learn how to turn our experience into a blessing for others. That we can take our survival and then serve others as they're going through similar situations. Part of why the 12-step programs have worked so amazingly well is people have to do their inner work. They go through their steps, but then that's not the end. That's the starting point to begin to serve others, to help others to find their way through the same crisis. That's why when cancer survivors can speak to those going through a situation with an authenticity and a compassion and a love that is helpful and allows that experience to be transcended. So wherever it is, I always say, I told you enough about my life that at one point it was a mess. So I've just taken my mess, tried to work through it, and help you get through yours. That's really all ministers do, I think, and therapists, right? We just deal with our own stuff, hopefully, and then help you get through yours. Sometimes we like to just try and work with yours, but I've discovered that doesn't work so well. And then there is the quality that I believe is essential, and that is the quality of positivity. Can we keep an attitude of what greater good can come from this situation? I've shared the story many times here about my wonderful nephew, and Riley Poor, and he was an extreme athlete, skier, snowboarder, all that winter stuff, and he did what they call extreme skiing, which if you've ever watched this on TV, it's pretty amazing. They flip around and twirl and do all kinds of crazy things that people should not do, especially with skis, but that's what they do. Then he moved into videographer. He was managing a team, working with Nike as a consultant. He became getting the video and all that sort of thing. And one night they all got together, and I'm sure there was some degree of partying involved. I don't know that, but I'm going to guess, not a huge stretch. And so they said, wouldn't it be fun to jump off this balcony into the pool? And so he jumped, he hit his head, created a spinal injury, and from that point forward, he's been quadriplegic. Now, he is, some of you have met him, the most remarkable young man. In fact, I'm going to have him come speak here sometime just to share his story. Because here is a kid who had his life changed in ways that we can only imagine. From being a profound athlete to not being able to dress oneself, to be completely dependent on others to help. But you see, he's still an executive with Nike. He was still able to keep his job. They've been wonderfully supportive. He moved through this situation. He bought his own home. They've refigured it. He has this wonderful life. He now has this very sweet girlfriend. I'm hearing wedding bells. I don't know if they've decided that yet, but they've created this wonderful life. And one of the things that I'm always touched by his positivity towards life. Of course, he has, as so many do, that have experienced something, such an appreciation for life itself, for the gift of being here, and that awareness and understanding that he is not his body, that he is more than this body, and that this thing that has happened for him has become an opportunity for him to be of greater service to others. He is a remarkable young man, and he is one of my heroes. So, bad stuff happens. It does. We've all been there. But the question is, what do we do with the bad stuff that happens? Right? It's part of being in this life experience. There's a sweet little story that I've always loved. It's an old one, but you've probably heard it. But there's this wonderful little gal who's complaining to grandma about all the problems in her life and how the kids are and the husband is and da-da-da-da-da and all these situations. And so grandma, being wise and wonderful, goes into the kitchen and puts 3 pots of water on the stove and turns them all to boil. And the girl's talking, watching but talking. Grandma's not saying anything. And so she's into one pot, she throws carrots. And into the second pot, she throws eggs. And into the last pot, she throws coffee. And so when it's all done, she takes them out of the pots. And she says, honey, look at this. What's happened to these carrots? She says, they became soft and they're disintegrating. She says, She says, what happened to the eggs? They became hard and rigid. She said, She said, what happened to the coffee? The coffee got transcended into an experience. And she said, we all get to make this choice. When we get into the hot water, when the trouble times in life, we can go soft and fall apart. Or we can go hard and become rigid. Or we can incorporate what is happening into our greater life experience and create something new and a new possibility and a new emerging something. You get to be at choice as to which pot you're going to be. I love that story because I am just such a profound believer in the work of Ernest Holmes and Joseph Campbell that Ernest Holmes says you can, through your creative thinking, you can influence the experience of your life. But Joseph Campbell helps us understand that there's a soul's journey that's taking place. And so sometimes where we may not have been thinking this was part of what we wanted for our life, if we are willing, when we see it, we understand that all of us on this journey are going to go through hard places. We are going to be challenged, and we're going to have ordeals. It's what makes good literature good literature. They don't write a story about a boring stuff. We went on a picnic. Everything was perfect. We went home. Whew. There's a bestseller waiting to happen, right? Right? We want to read the stories about people who've been challenged by life and who transcended it. Great autobiographies, and you see it in every autobiography or every biography, great people had great challenges. They had people that didn't believe in them. They had situations that didn't appear that they could overcome. But some inner spiritual quality that lives within us says, you are bigger than this. And so every problem in our life ultimately becomes an opportunity to reveal something more if we are willing. But we've got to decide who we'll be. What will we do with this situation? What we will do with this circumstance? Who will I become as a result of this? I've shared enough about my story that you know that I did not fall off a turnip truck as the enlightened soul that you see today. It took some work to get here. And yet, I also know that it's part of why my ministry is real. Because I know where people come from. I know the challenges that people experience. Now, we haven't all had the same challenges, but we've all had challenges. And what I also know is that had I not had the experiences that I had, how else would I have discovered who I truly am? How would I have learned to live from spiritual truth and from a greater reality? Sometimes I think it's so easy in our Science of Mind teachings or our New Thought teachings or the secret teachings to think that all we do is sit around and visualize what we want and it poofs into being and then we're all done. I have not experienced that, and most of you haven't either. But I do know that in visualizing what we want and visioning for who we want to become, then everything that happens in our life can be used in a context that allows us to grow and to expand and to reveal something more of the divine. As I said, we always have to, we say all the time, it's all God. Well, it's either all God or it's not all God, right? So even when these challenging, hard situations are occurring in our life, it's got to be God having an interaction with itself. Now we get to be at choice at what qualities of the divine will we bring forth from this situation. That's why I work at my amazing nephew, Riley, and I just say, what an amazing young man that he didn't go bitter, that he didn't fall apart, but rather he incorporated this experience and he touches people's lives in ways you can't even imagine. Is it what I would have chosen for him? No. But it's his soul's journey. So I love him and support him in bringing that forth. And he stands as a testament to me. I don't think he's ever read a Science of Mind magazine or a book, but he lives the teaching in ways that I aspire to. That's what I see with people who are willing to be transcendent, is they are willing to allow that whatever's happening in their life to be an obstacle, but not an impediment. They're willing to use those situations as opportunities for their growth, for their spiritual unfoldment, for their greater good to be realized. And I stand in awe and in that mindset that says I'm not condition-based. I'm going to live from my heart. I'm going to live from divine truth that lives within me. And I'm going to take everything in my life, in all things give thanks, and bring it forward for a greater good to be of service to others. Right? Wherever you are, just know that your life is unfolding and it's all God. And ultimately, it's all good if we take that and learn to be transcendent, to incorporate it, and to use it as a part of our growth and our unfoldment and our greater yet to be. Wherever you are in that journey, just know that you are loved, that you are supported, and you are blessed. We're grateful that you are part of this community. Let us pray. As we turn inward, simply honoring and acknowledging this one divine life, this one infinite possibility, the one presence that is everywhere, always available. And even as we close the outer eyes, we open the inner eyes of true spiritual vision. The recognition that there is indeed one life, one power, one infinite being. And that we are some part of it, as it is all that we are. So we enter into that state of recognition that the same divine intelligence that has caused all things to be, that expresses itself in and through and as all creation, is our very life right here and right now. It is written that in this presence I live, I move, I have my being. And as I recognize that for each of us gathered here, it becomes easy to speak the word of truth. For I know that there is not something that we must overcome. There is not something we must get. There is not something we must search for. But rather there is a divine presence, always fully orbed, that we must make welcome and available. To reveal the truth is the source and the substance of all spiritual healing. And so in that revelation, I'm simply just knowing that love is indeed the only reality. Divine, unconditional grace pouring itself into existence. And as we open our hearts and our minds to that love, our lives are healed and transformed. It becomes easy to forgive ourselves and others. We choose love over every other option. As we speak this word of truth, I'm simply knowing that wholeness is our divine reality. And so we allow that wholeness to be revealed and expressed through our physical, mental, spiritual, and emotional bodies. Health and vitality becomes the order of the day. And I am knowing that we are, right here, right now, abundant beings. For we are one with the source, with the Creator. That which is self-generative and is always pouring itself into existence is our very life. So we open our hearts, we open our minds, we open the very soul to allow that recognition of our divine inheritance to be realized. Wherever you are this day, whatever burden you may be carrying on your heart, I invite you into this sacred and holy space to be willing to create space for light, for truth, for love, for wisdom, for insight, for clarity to be revealed. To allow that obstacle to become the opportunity for greater grace to be revealed. How good it is to know there is but one life. That life is our life right here and right now. That we are blessed beyond measure. And so as we experience the many blessings of our life, it becomes natural to extend the blessing to others. We bless this spiritual community. We know that it is a divine idea unfolding in ways of joy, of peace, of abundance, of all good. We extend our blessing to our brothers and sisters all around the planet. We're holding the high watch, the high vision for a planet at peace, where the old ways fall away and the new emergence of truth, of love, of brotherhood and sisterhood of all humanity emerges triumphant. So we're holding the planet at peace in a world that works for all. And as always, we bless all priests, rabbis, ministers, teachers of every faith. For we know there are many pathways to the divine. So we choose to honor and celebrate them all. How good it is to bear witness to this spiritual truth. How good it is to know the transcendent reality of divine love, of peace, of joy. And so in joy and gratitude, I'm just giving thanks that this is so. I'm grateful for a law of mind that operates upon the consciousness that we've established here, bringing forth the highest good for all concerned in perfect timing and in divine right order. So it is with great joy and profound gratitude that I simply give thanks. I allow it to be so, as together we say, and so it is.